So celebrating St. Andrew's Day, well, just like I presume you were mentioning Kirsten, who didn't know a lot about why we celebrated, and Mary, I suspect, wasn't told a whole lot about it in our school days, though she's a bit younger than I. But we did learn who he was, but how to celebrate, well, that was not always on the agenda. So I'm going to talk first about who he was. Legend has it he's been Scotland's patron saint since the 8th or even 9th century, and until comparatively recently, he seems to have been best celebrated by the Scots overseas. But since 1999, our First Minister has addressed the nation, all Scots, immigrants, all welcome, and on November the 30th, wishes us all a happy St. Andrew's Day. Now, apart from St. James, the patron saint of Spain, St. Andrew is the only patron saint of any country who is a New Testament figure. He's also the patron saint of Greece, and he's claimed by Tenerife and several other countries as well. So who was he? Well, you probably know a lot of this anyway, more than you think. He was the brother of Simon Peter, and he's often called the fisherman's saint. But before getting to the point of why he's our patron saint, a brief background to his life. And the entire story is told in the Acts of the Apostles. After Christ's resurrection, Peter and Andrew set out from Jerusalem on the first missionary journey. And when they reached the Black Sea, Peter turned towards Rome, while Andrew continued east, evangelizing in Asia Minor, Macedonia, southern Russia, and Greece. And there are accounts through various traditions of miracles. But one legend says that in the Roman colony of Patras, he won the community to Christianity, including the Roman governor who ordered the burning of the old temples and the destruction of idols. When the news reached Rome, the Emperor Nero was furious. He was afraid the new doctrines would undermine his power, so he deposed the governor and he appointed a new governor, Agatus, to restore the former order. Not long afterwards, unfortunately, the new emperor's wife, Maximilia, became very, very ill. And when Andrew healed her, not surprisingly, she became a devoted disciple. Agatus was furious, and he commanded Andrew to choose: sacrifice to their gods or suffer death by crucifixion. Andrew refused to denounce his Christian faith, and so he chose martyrdom. Not on a cross like Christ. Apparently, some of the legends say that he himself said it shouldn't be, he wasn't worthy of the same kind. This one, the Decusate cross, which they call now the St. Andrew's cross. He was scourged, tied to the cross, and suffered agonies of thirst and hunger, as well as pain. And 3 days later, November the 30th, he died. Now, the story goes that 300 years later, a monk whose name was Regulus had a vision to take St. Andrew's bones and sail the sea west to Alba. So, enshrined in a little small box, I think, they set off. But they landed, or they were shipwrecked off the coast of Fife. So that's Fife, the little red bit there on that map. And if you can see St. Andrews there on the east coast, St. Andrews. And they came ashore there in the place that we now know as St. Andrews. Now, at that time, this area was occupied by the Picts. Scotland was in 4 kingdoms at the time. It wasn't united into one country. And the Picts later, they did convert to Christianity. So they enshrined the bones and they founded a church there. Then we move on a few hundred years back to Fife. And on the eve of a battle, the king of the Picts saw a blazing decusate cross in the sky. And that gave him courage and faith to go into battle, into victory. I thought of that decusate cross just last week as I looked up, and there were two jet aeroplanes crossing a very blue sky. And I thought, how fascinating. The jet fuel, I presume, that comes out behind them formed a huge decusate cross. I didn't think I was having a vision. I was actually near Edinburgh Airport, so that explained that. But it wasn't until the year about 1290 that the emblem, that white cross on a blue background, became the emblem of Scotland. Yes, nowadays, if you drive north from England and you reach that border, you will meet it emblazoned on a big, huge billboard. Welcome to Scotland. Fáilte go Alapa. Alapa being the Gaelic for Scotland. Welcome. And so from then on, from the 15th, it became the royal seal. And after the 15th century, established on the flag, the Saltire, a symbol of the nation. Now, the celebration of St. Andrew's Day on November the 30th was once part of church celebrations, but after the Reformation, the 1500s, which tend to ban all religious holidays, saints' days, holy days, including Christmas, so everything changed. I would just say here that even when I was a child, Christmas was not a holiday. Our dad went to work on Christmas, so did everybody else, and the postman came too. And even until the 1970s, some schools in the Highlands would not allow the children to celebrate Christmas. Oh dear, how lacking in joy. Life needs some joy, and I'm glad that it doesn't happen now. We have far more. But it was once grandly celebrated. Yes, you'll see those flags all the way whenever there's an occasion. There's also another flag of Scotland, the rampant lion, and this was the royal seal, whereas the Saltire is the people's flag. So we have two flags. As children in school, and I wonder if this was Mary's experience, and as Ray, who's from Dundee, we didn't get told much about celebration, but we had to draw a flag. It was the Saltire. And then we had to draw another one, the St. George's Cross of England. And then another one, the St. Patrick's Cross, a decusate cross of Ireland. And by putting them all together, we were taught, this is our flag, the Union Jack, which from 1801 is a combination of all three flags. Whereupon I said, hang on, what about Wales? To which I was told, Wales was already part and was already embraced by England. They had to have the same St. George. Or did they? Well, so there was the flag. And in 1952, after the Queen's coronation, every child in the whole country waved these flags, the Union Jack. But now you'll tend to see this one a lot more often. So how did they celebrate in the old days, from when the bones were enshrined in St. Andrews? The cathedral now is in ruins. But we can tell that St. Andrew's Day, the Saint's Day, was celebrated grandly in the Royal Court of Edinburgh. Now, this is right up until 1603, when our two countries were joined, the Union of the Crowns. But until then, there was a very splendid celebration, and the makers, or the poets of the day, left quite a lot of descriptions of what they did. There was David Lindsay, Sir David Lindsay, 1490 to 1655. There was Henryson and Dunbar and the minstrel Blind Harry, and they all left descriptions. I'll just give you a little, and I also was going to mention the coins, which were beginning to take the St. Andrew's Cross as a mark on these coins. But here, and there's not forgetting the saint himself and our flag. But during the reign of James IV, there was a feast in honour. And in a long poem, David Lindsay talks about what they ate. And ilk year for his patron's sake, a banquet royal would he make, with wild fowl, venison, and wine, with tart and flam and fruitage fine. There's a whole lot more. So it was, and they had music, poems, songs, dancing. It was an absolutely wonderful occasion. So there we have it in the late 1400s, early 1500s. James, I should have an S on that, by the way. James, he sadly was the one who was killed at the Battle of Flodden. But what did the ordinary people do in those days? Oh, they also had a feast, not quite so splendid as the fowl and venison, tart and flam and fruitage fine, but there's lots of descriptions of them. They went what they call Sankt Andrain. Now, depending on where you lived, the east coast and other coastal areas, the food was fish. St. Andrew, the fisherman's saint. But the fish they had for St. Andrew's Day, it was usually cod. Why? Well, salmon was out of season, and it couldn't be the haddock because the haddock bears the thumbprint of Peter. Were you told that as a child? If you look at the haddock, yes, sure enough, there's a thumbprint just by his gills. And then if they lived inland, they went out early in the morning, trapping squirrels and rabbits, and they had a feast. That, by the way, on the top left is a little feast. I haven't tried it, of squirrel. Apparently it's quite edible. Rabbits, yes, I've tried that many a time, and hares. And they took pheasants and partridges or whatever came their way. I'm not sure that it was all legal. But then they would betake themselves to the alehouse. But in Edinburgh and near Duddingston Loch and in the area of Holyrood Palace, on the slopes of the hill there of Arthur's Seat, that huge area was once an area where they had a sheep or a cattle market. And being towards the end of the month of November, St. Martinmas is just on the 28th, and on that day they would butcher the animals, and they would keep those who were selling them or working for another farmer or a drover. They would keep the heads, and sheep's head, as they called it, was quite a special dish. Now, don't be too put. I hope there's not too many vegans and vegetarians with weak stomachs, but that is, I haven't seen it served like that, but I have seen it served. My grandmother used to cook sheep's head broth, and I won't give you the recipe because you probably could do without it for a little while anyway, in case you're urgently looking for food recipes. But it was a very splendid, and bearing in mind that this is a time of year when they were heading to a time of austerity, there wouldn't be a lot of extra food. So what a night to have a celebration, and then the ale. Now, in 1603, James VI of Scotland became James I of England in the Union of the Crowns, and the entire Scottish court moved to London. The court being in Westminster. We still had our own parliament in Edinburgh, but the king sat, no, not in Dunfermline Toon anymore, but the king in London. It would have to be admitted that James VI of Scotland, or first of England, was quite an Anglified and very happily Anglified individually. When you read some of his ideas, he was absolutely had no time for Gaelic speakers, and they ought to be done away with, really. And so sent a band of people from Fife actually to try and settle and civilize the outer islands by making them speak Scots or English at least, and certainly not Gaelic. They were seen off, by the way, in various skirmishes with various clans. But when the Scotch court moved to London, with it a lot of Scots workers, and there was a fund set up because some of them fell on very hard times. And towards the end of that century, it was called the Scots Box, and it was the Scots Box was a name for it. It was like a mutual aid fund established by those who did quite well. And the idea was it would support the less fortunate compatriots. And it certainly did that. There are various records of what good it did, among them being in 1655. Well, actually, that was slightly earlier than that. There was incorporated not in 1690, but in 1611. I thought I made a mistake there. So 1655, that's the year of the Great Plague. And unfortunately, among the victims were over 300 Scots, buried at the expense of the Scots Box. But this Scots Box was looked after by committee after committee, and then sometime during the 19th century, it completely disappeared. No doubt there was various wars. Nobody quite knows where it went, or somebody was allegedly looking after it, and who knows. And it was almost believed it was gone forever. Then in 1923, it turned up in a London junk shop. So they restored it again, and it still has its original purpose for the relief of infirm Scotsmen and women in the Greater London area. So if you fall on hard times, and that's where you happen to be, and indeed there are quite a number, sadly, of homeless young Scots who think they can go there and life will be all right because it wasn't all right back home. Not so, not so. But the idea of, I'm going to pause just at this moment, and well, we're about to cross the Atlantic. And that was when I first was confronted by the question Siggy asked me, tell us about St. Andrew's Day. I emigrated to Canada in 1967, and I went to university there. And of course, I joined various student things like student folk clubs and went to poetry readings and enjoyed life to the full, loved learning Newfoundland songs. And before long, I had a few, well, one always needs to do a little bit of work other than the academic work as a student. So I used to earn a little bit by doing some radio and television work. And one year, the year after I arrived, actually, I was invited to the radio station, and it was a 6 o'clock slot where they had What's On, a roundup of What's On. And unbeknownst to me, I might have seen it and didn't pay attention, there was a St. Andrew's night celebration in the St. Andrew's Hall in St. John's. So I got invited to the CBC radio station in St. John's, and this is going out live, by the way. So, said the announcer, we have Margaret Bennett from Scotland with us, and she's going to tell us all about St. Andrew. So I managed to mutter a few things about, yes, he was the patron saint, and explained why, and the flag, etc. And they said, so Margaret, how do you celebrate St. Andrew's Day in Scotland? I paused and I said, I've never celebrated it. I was mortified with embarrassment. He took a deep breath. He said, you what? I said, no, I have to tell you the truth. This is the first time I've ever seen. Now, that was 1967. And unknown to me, of course, things were about to change, but not immediately. So I managed to bluff my way through the rest of the little slot of the programme by saying, well, sing us one of Robert Burns's songs. I'm sure you know plenty of them. And thankfully I did. Well, if we look across the world, we do find that it, for years, was celebrated better overseas. This I just chose at random. Where's this one? The Hong Kong Football Club. There you go. They're having St. Andrew's Ball 2025. Yes, you can buy a ticket. A table for 12. Oh my word, is that $20,000 for a table for 12? I think I might have to give that a miss. Anyway, not in sync. But overseas St. Andrew's balls go back a long, long way. This particular one, oopsie, I suddenly lost my screen share. What did I do? I might have to send for my technical help again. I don't. Can you see? Can you see my PowerPoint? By the way,
No, just share it again, and then we'll be fine.
I will. I will, except for the fact that I'll probably have to. I'll share it again. I'm very sorry for that. But I'll have to go clattering through it now and find it. Technical support is required in the kitchen. Oh, there we are. Look at that. Anyhow, this one is a St. Andrew's Ball in Montreal, Canada, in the 1880s. Isn't that a splendid ball? I doubt they were doing anything like that in Highland Scotland, but apparently this was the thing. And in fact, I began to reconsider the celebration of St. Andrew and the St. Andrew societies that were springing up everywhere, North Carolina, Virginia, California, and all over North America. And I moved to Quebec in the early, about 1974 or 5, and realized there that St. Andrew and St. Andrew societies were very big in Quebec. And like the Scots box in London, they had a very benevolent role to play. In particular, one case was drawn to my attention. There was, or at least I heard the story so often of a young man whose parents from the Isle of Lewis. And his name was Donald Morrison, born in Canada. But he was imprisoned as an outlaw. And it was the St. Andrew's Society of Montreal who got him a lawyer and got him some help that he wasn't immediately executed. It's a sad story that goes on from there, but the St. Andrew's Society of Montreal played a huge role in that. And we now know that it was flown at the Alamo, at the Battle of the Alamo, when many of the soldiers were Scots. They fought at the Alamo. And so they are appeared everywhere, with, of course, the Scotch regiments as well. And the wave after wave of emigration ensured that St. Andrew's Day would be a day to remember Scotland, the homeland. Perhaps it's a good thing they did. It was not, I wouldn't say forgotten at home. Maybe Mary can come in on this a bit later, but it wasn't celebrated in my youth. There we go. But overseas, yes, that one was taken in Nova Scotia. We now can see the same in Scotland. And in 2006, New York began their tartan week, when there was tartan splashed all over the place. I had the privilege of going one time, and book Trust Scotland sent a few writers. And it was very splendid to see that huge array of people coming out almost as ambassadors for Scotland, and St. Andrew being celebrated, the Saltire, and all things Scottish. That was promoted by the Royal Scots Corporation. Still has a role. Sheltered housing, the support for students, student scholarships. There were several in Edinburgh when I was teaching at Edinburgh University. I had one from North Carolina whose entire PhD was supported by the St. Andrew Society in North Carolina. And rather like that Scots box that appeared. So how do we celebrate? Well, if you go to Quebec, vous êtes plus écossais que vous pensez. More Scottish than you think. And indeed, living in Quebec, I was to find that. I stayed in a place a few miles from a settlement called Stornoway. It was entirely French speaking. And there is the owner of the inn who does tours to celebrate les premiers arrivants écossais. And here was a friend I brought from Aberdeenshire, Norman Kennedy, a wonderful singer. We went to share their celebration, and he couldn't believe that he could wrap himself up in a Saltire in Quebec, quite near the Vermont border. It's quite splendid, but it certainly wakes up the Scot, and has now we have a whole generation who have been thoroughly wakened up to the meaning of what Scotland means to them, what it has contributed in the world. So all over Scotland now, yes, there we are, the Orkney Islands, not quite the furthest north, St. Andrew's Day being declared, and not without music. The question, usually countries who are claiming their nationality have an anthem, but so far Scotland doesn't actually have a national anthem. We still sing at gatherings, we still sing God Save the King, because he's the king of Scotland as well as the other parts of Britain. But this song made a huge impact on the whole of Scotland when it was recorded. It was written by a man called Roy Williamson, who's there playing the bouzouki, and he sang with a group called the Corries. I'll let you hear it. And although your microphones are turned off, I put the words there so you can just sing along with it. It seemed to incite a pride in Scotland among young. I was young when it came out, and before, I think it hadn't been played on the radio over a month, then everybody was buying the 45 RPM records to play, and then we were all singing it, joining in. And the next thing, it was appearing at football matches, at rugby matches.
I can't hear it. Okay.
Oh,
Yes, it's fine now. It's fine now. Sorry.
Will we see your light again? That fought and died upon your way but hill and glen, and stood against him. Proud Edward's army, and send them homeward, they think again.
I think it's broken, the tune, Margaret. Perhaps you would like to stop it here, because
okay.
you can't really hear the full thing.
You can't hear it, okay?
Well, you can hear it, but it's so slow, it sounds strange.
Does it sound? I can turn off. Can I turn off? I could go back and turn off the sound, and who'd like to sing it? I could sing it myself, I presume.
You want to sing it yourself? You want
again? Excuse me till I take a wee sip of water. Well,
Thank you. Thank you.
This, of course, is referring to the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, Edward's army. It was won by the Scots, but very few of these battles were. But so these days are past now, but we can still rise now and be a nation again. It was a long, long time since the Battle of Bannockburn to when the Corries sang that song, but somehow it seemed to stir something among a new generation. We had pretty well all of the 20th century, when we were all trained to be good British citizens. And then there was a rethinking. The formation of the Scottish National Party had already happened a few couple decades beforehand, but it had a lot of momentum to gather. Those who wanted Scotland to return. I should have mentioned that the parliaments, although the crowns, two countries were united in 1603, the parliaments were not united until 1707. And that made a huge difference, because all of the administrative aspects of Scotland moved to Westminster in London. The Scottish Education Department, where was that? Oh, the Scottish office, London. So Mary and I and whoever else is Scottish, until 1999, the Scottish Education Department was in London. So the songs that we sang in our schools, they were from the Oxford Book of English Folk Songs, and we had a few others that were from other books that we did manage to do some songs from Burns Day. Yes, we did the whole of January on those. And then if there was a Gaelic festival coming up, we would sing some of these as well. And there was a narrowing of the repertoire that was taught in schools. School children did, however, learn to dance. That was on the curriculum, and Mary was one of those teachers who taught that dance. But that dance, the Royal Society of Scottish Country Dance, only dates to 1923. There were traditional dances long before that. So there's been a sort of narrowing and a rather with new ideas on education, how we should make it more pristine. We should tidy it up and make it more fit with the British image of what it should be. So here we are, but that's not the British image of what it should be. Here we have it now, where those rather ridiculous hats, which they call the Hey Jimmy hats, people ram them on their heads as if we were all red-haired. We're not. And then, just in case you haven't noticed the hat, they then paint saltires. Sometimes not quite, you wonder how they decide which eye to put that white on. But it's quite a formidable sight and a bit of a statement. We probably find that the people who are wearing those are also dressed in kilts, and they're probably headed to a football match or another event, or maybe they're out for New Year. There's an assertion of Scottishness, an assertion that appears pretty well all over the world. If there's an international sports match, these people will be there singing their hearts out for Scotland, and will spend their last penny to fly there and go and support. And so this is a sort of typical one. This is Murrayfield in Edinburgh at a rugby match where they're all singing, but I wouldn't play that because it'll be all muffled. So it's to be expected. They cope with all the defeats as well. Come back and say, well, it'll be better the next time. The optimism still is there, with a little bit of success lately, if you might have noticed. But we don't still have a national anthem. It's been suggested that the song composed by our greatest 20th century folklorist, Hamish Henderson, "The Freedom Come All Ye," would be one. And when proposed, Hamish himself said, well, I think it's actually the Scots, which is the language of the song, is probably too broad for people to learn. So let's look at the meaning of it. It sounds, roch the wind in a clear day's dawn, blaws the clouds, heelster gaudy o'er the bay, but there's mair nor a roch wind blowing through the great glen of the world. Right, it's a rough wind in the clear day's dawning, blows the clouds head over heels across the bay, but there's more than a rough wind blowing through the great glen of the world today. There's a great glen in Scotland, by the way, and Hamish is doing it. This is an analogy of the paths that we make all through the world. But it's a thought that would make our rodents and all the rogues who strut and swagger take the road and seek other pastures to carry out their wicked schemes. This he wrote, by the way, around about 1960, after 2 terrible world wars. And he's a great pacifist, although he fought in the Second World War. Like many of his generation, became a pacifist. No more will our fine young men march to war at the behest of jingoists and imperialists, nor will young children from mining communities and rural hamlets mourn the ships sailing down the River Clyde, in other words, emigrant ships, and broken families in lands that we've helped to bring to destroy, will never again have reason to curse the advancing Scots. In other words, we're not free from guilt in other lands. We don't want to be under the command that asks us to do this. Instead, black and white, united in friendship, and they'll marry, will make the slums of the employers bare. So on the last verse of it, use a picture of Hamish. Hamish, I became a colleague of Hamish's, so I thought you might like that one as it when I worked with him and knew him. So come all you who love freedom, pay no attention to the prophets of doom. In your house all the children of Adam will be welcomed with food, drink and clean, bright accommodation. And when Maclean returns to his people, John Maclean he's talking about, John Maclean was imprisoned at the start of the First World War because he was a conscientious objector. He lived in Glasgow. He was a school teacher, but many of his family and his friends were shipyard workers. And he said, I refuse to become the enemy of my fellow shipyard workers in Dagan and in other countries, in Germany or any other country where there are shipyards. I'm not going to fight. I refuse. Why should I? We're all working. So Maclean was imprisoned as a traitor, and he did return, but he was very worn out and suffered from ill health. He lasted about 3 years. When Maclean returns to his people, all the roses and cherry trees will be in blossom, and the black guy from Nyanga will break the capitalist stronghold on everyone's life. So it's quite a strong song, and now I wonder if you'll hear this. So here, I thought you might like, the young man in the front here was the musician who visited Mainz in the summer. That's Cameron, who was a student at the time. And then this young lady here, who was a student then, one of my students, she's now the rector of Aberdeen University. So there we were, and I would always insist that we all learned the Freedom Come All Ye, and we sang it, and still do, at the end of every concert and folk club and most performances, and always on St. Andrew's Day. So now, stop me, Ziggy, if you can't hear it. It'll be a shame if you can't, but let's see if we can do it.
It's broken again on my side.
Is it okay?
It's broken for everybody else or only me?
Can you hear it?
It's a strong delay. Why didn't I just play it from my screen?
Oh yeah,
because I
can
have
you?
this on my system.
Have you got it? Well, that would be good. Yes, that would be great, and that might work it.
Okay, so I'm just getting things ready here. Let's see.
And I'll show the picture, and you play the sound bite, which is embedded. Wait, no, you actually you need to share yours too, because
I need to share my screen too.
And sure, I'll go stop,
right.
shall I?
Yes. So is that the St. Andrew's Day? No, which one is that? Is that the Gaelic one you want?
No. It's before the Gaelic one. No, it's after. Oh gosh. No, I can't. I'm not looking at it, so I wouldn't be able
because
to.
Because you sent me 3. One is called the Flower of Scotland, you've already seen. Then we have the Gaelic one, and we have a St. Andrew's Day dance you sent me.
No, don't go there. No, you're way ahead. You're way ahead. No, go back.
No, I'm just okay. Now I'm just trying to put this embedded.
My screen with just the words of Hamish's song, and then there's one screen with a picture of Hamish in the corner and a picture of Hamish and me in this, and there's the one after that.
Yeah, it seems to be working. Okay. Shall I just share the screen?
Yeah, please share this. Yes, share the screen.
And I just play it, and we see what works.
And when we reach that one slide, and if you just click on the little arrow on the screen, it'll play the film.
Exactly. So can you tell me whether you can hear it now?
I can't see it though. I can't see it.
Okay, right. Why did I just upload this here? Share.
When you share the screen.
Share. Hold on. Include sound. Right. Windows. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Can you go to,
Sorry?
yes, you're not in slideshow, but it doesn't matter. It's in a smaller version, but that's fine. We can hear
Okay,
it.
no
right?
worries.
Yeah, yep, that's fine.
That's better?
Yeah.
Sorry, I need to move this screen because you can see this here, right?
Well, see,
Sorry, I can't see this. Do I need to move anything here because
No.
you're small?
go up to the top, Siggy. Do you see where it says slideshow?
Yes.
Touch slideshow, right? Touch slideshow.
Nice.
Touch that, tip slideshow, and then after
No,
you
it's-
touch that, you will see from the slide. Oh,
Yeah, I have it here. So is that correct now?
thank you,
That
Siggy.
was Donald Smith there as well. I saw
Oh, did you
Donald.
see?
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody. I couldn't actually see it as a film. I could hear it as a track. So if I could share my screen again, did everybody see it as a film, or did you just hear it as a track? Oops.
Hello,
said-
nobody talking?
No. Well, can I share?
I saw it as a film. Wrong.
Oh, did you?
No.
Yes, thank you. That's for some reason I couldn't. May I share my screen again?
Yes. Over to you.
Somebody else
Thank you.
only heard it as a track. Yeah, okay. Right, stop sharing. And have you stopped sharing, Siggy? Yes. Okay. Wait now. I'll share mine again if I can. Where did that PowerPoint go? There. Oh, there we go. Well, those of you who didn't hear, I'm just going to, at the last verse, everybody stood up. That's what happened. And the whole audience was absolutely, oh yes, there's Donald Smith. And so that's what happened. They all, now, at the same time, we have had no official status for Scots. It was still not officially taught in schools, not until 2015 actually. And Gaelic was slightly ahead after some great endeavours to have Gaelic taught in schools. We finally had some Gaelic schools. And this photograph here was taken last a year, just over a year
I
ago.
can't see your screen. Can somebody else see the screen? I think you need to share it.
Oh, nobody can. Okay, well, thank you for telling me, because I better wait now. Well, I don't quite know what happened there, because share. Whoops! I pressed share the screen. Okay, thank you. So share the screen again. Right, there we are. I can't seem to get it back up. Hello. My technical help is required. I came out of screen sharing and now I can't get back in. At least
You need that?
I came out of screen share, but now I can't. No matter what I do with that little screen share thing, I can't get it back on.
Oh, yes. What do you want?
The screen.
What would you like to do?
My PowerPoint.
Oh, your PowerPoint.
Yes.
The
Yes.
PowerPoint we need.
Yeah, okay, good.
There. That's it. Yeah. Well, I tried that, but nobody said they couldn't see it.
That's it. Thank you.
Oh,
It's
you
there
can
now.
see. Okay.
Yes.
Right. Well, this photograph was taken in October just past, and it was at the end of our National Gaelic Song Festival, music festival called the Maud, which is their competitions and for choirs and so forth. And this was on a rainy day when the Maud ended after a whole week of Gaelic language singing and storytelling, plays, drama, musician. They stood outside and they sang this. The song is called Canon and Gale. Sorry, no, not that one. Sorry, Tokavi. It means raise up the sound. So now I wonder if you will be able to hear this. I think somewhere in this I've got a sound file embedded. It's quite thrilling to. So in case it goes wrong on me, the translation: exalt the language of our country, raise it up to the highest status, build it up firmly, be kind to it. Horo, build it up with the Gaelic. It's the language of youth, the language of age, the language of our ancestor, the language of love. Although it's now old, it's law-abiding, strong. It hasn't lost its strength or bowed under pressure. The great current of English threatens to swallow up our language and our country. Well, that's after 200 years of an Education Act in place. But stand true to the language of your love, and it will not die until the end of the world. Despite all the attacks of the enemy to rob the Gael of its precious rights, there will never be rest until they're victorious over all the evil and crime that can drive away. That is because at one time you had to get an interpreter if you had to go to court for anything. It had to be in English with an interpreter in your own country. It was quite strange. So let me see if I can get this to play.
There's a strong delay on mine again. Is that the same for everybody?
Can't hear it?
I can see it, but
can't
there's a
hear it.
long delay. It can't. You can't really hear it. Do you want me to play it?
Well,
You sing it. You sing it.
Well, the only disadvantage of me singing it is you don't get 1,000 voices, which is the power of it, and they get quite worked out of it. But I'll give you the gist of it then. She can in a hoik, she can in a hoosh, be can in a sheesh, be can in a girl, get the niche. It's not my pitch act. Get niches there forest ven, but the highliest clue to streak your fame. Tokavi, cannon er doege, tokavi source you heber och klucha, Toke gutaien spipai vipael. He horo toke vi source Gaelic. So a determination to restore the use of the Gaelic language. It comes very late in the history of the Gaelic language. Raise up your voice for the language of the mountains. Let it be heard through the moors. Sing it loud, its fame, its poetry, its music. O clan of the Gaels, be steadfast. Stand shoulder to shoulder. Stand bravely by the language. Don't abandon it or raise its banner high. But let the permanent letters be written on every heart. We'll not abandon, we'll never be lost, the beautiful language of the country. Written, as you see, by a man who lived in the century before, more than the 20th. And it's only now it really is happening, because on St. Andrew's Day this year, our Kate Forbes, our Deputy First Minister, announced that at last both Scots and Gaelic have now got official status in Scotland. And so that's a great celebration. So I'm going to close off now, and you might not hear, there might be a delay in the music. There's a band. I was at this event, St. Andrew's Day celebration in the little town of Kilmarnock. And this was in the church hall in Ayrshire. It was nothing fancy, as they said, and the local community, basically we might call social housing, local primary school came, and they all turned out. We didn't know what to expect. I was invited to maybe tell some stories and sing some songs with the children. That was delight. So I sat there, and most of the evening was dancing. All the children who were of school age knew the dances. Then there's the little ones who are not in school age, and I had to capture this. This little piece of joy from a reality of how do we celebrate St. Andrew's Day in Scotland. Well, it's now celebrated everywhere. What a lovely change from when I was asked, tell us, Margaret, how do you say? Well, here it is.
I can't hear the music. Can somebody hear it?
So they had 3 hours of that with lots and lots of fun. Children staying up late. It was a special night for them. Lots of tartan. There was whole families coming in tartan. And I would say there was a real joy. There was a buffet. There was drinks to be had, all kinds of drinks to be had. And families there together, exchanging news and lots of laughter. And it really was a night when we more than understand how important it is to have those times, People come in on a Friday night and they're toil weary and gosh me, and just want to collapse into a chair. But they go home totally relaxed, tired, but full of joy. And if St. Andrew's Day does that, and it can do, then let's keep it. Let's all celebrate. And so here we are.